At the risk of sounding like an after-school special, every channel is different. Every one of them is special or unique in their own special way, yada yada yada. Practically, this means it's hard to make universal advice. What's right for one channel might not be right for another channel or their audience. Some of this we can condense down to universal principles, like having good titles and thumbnails is pretty darn important, but there's going to be a lot of specific nuance. That said, I think that there's one piece of advice that's important and universal for every single person that works in our industry. Whether you work in production or programming or community management, there's something that everybody should be doing. In fact, when I've helped interview people for jobs, no matter what job they're going into, I ask them the same question every single time. Because no matter who you are, if you want to work in this space, you need to watch YouTube videos. Let's get into why. Now, depending on whether or not you've spent time in other industries, this is not a unique concept. Writers will tell aspiring novelists that they need to read more books. Movie directors will tell wannabe directors that they need to watch more movies. If you want to work in an art form, you need to be an avid consumer of said art form. In that sense, YouTube is no different than any other medium, except that YouTube is pretty young and I don't hear that advice being given in the exact same way. When you hear people talk about what are some important things to keep in mind when starting a YouTube channel, they'll talk about following your passion or uploading consistently, and sure, those are really good things, but we also need to tell people that they need to be watching YouTube. There's a reason that every writer says that. There's a reason that every film director says that. There's a reason that every game developer says that. I don't know if it's because we're really young or because we've destroyed all the gatekeepers, but we don't say that nearly as often as we should. So if you were wondering, the question I ask of every person I interview ever for some kind of YouTube job, it's, what are your favorite YouTube channels to watch? Because if you want to work in this space, you should have some idea of what this space is, and you should have some interest in it. Enough at least that you can tell me what you like to watch and what you like to see. Like, if you don't watch YouTube, why would you want to work in the YouTube industry? And while there's no right answer to that question, other than not having an answer, it helps lead into a lot of discussions about what they like, what they think works, what they think doesn't work, what they want to see more of on the platform. What somebody watches on YouTube tells you a lot about what they think about the platform. And whether you're an independent creator who's hiring a second person to help you out, or a big company who's hiring a bunch of people out, I encourage you to ask similar questions because, one, it helps break the ice, and two, it helps you understand each other about how you feel about the platform. So great, watch more YouTube. Maybe you already do. Maybe you bum around on your phone and you watch whatever comes through your feed. That said, when we encourage a writer to read more, we're not just telling them to read like an average audience member reads. We want them to absorb something more. If I'm watching YouTube to better understand YouTube, it's a different experience than me bumming around watching whatever video while I'm waiting at the DMV. This is the kind of active watching where you might want to take notes and jot things down on paper. Congratulations, even if you finish school, you still have to take notes sometimes. When you're actively watching to better understand the platform, you should probably spend a lot more time on the page prior to clicking on a video. Remember, the home page is one of the primary places that people make a decision to watch your content over somebody else's content, and so understanding how you yourself make decisions is really helpful. It's one thing to read an article on the best practices of YouTube. It's another thing entirely to sit there and understand and absorb how other channels are putting this into practice. So before you click on the video that you want to watch, ask yourself a few questions. Why do I want to watch this video? What was I drawn to first? When did I look at the title? Because you didn't look at the title first, I almost guarantee it. Was there anything else I was interested in watching? Were there parts of the page that I just really didn't register at all? Were there things that I actively avoided? There's a pretty common journey to how people select to watch videos. Usually what happens is some thumbnail will catch their eye. Once you've seen the thumbnail, then you look to the title for additional context, and that gives you an idea overall if this is something that you would like to watch. And sure, I can tell you that in person, and literally I just told you that in person. But it's so much more helpful if you experience it yourself and observe it actively. Understanding how quickly and instinctually you make decisions is super duper helpful for understanding how your audience is going to make decisions. And while you're here, try and pay attention to any other YouTube features like the community tab. Is there anything that you noticed about how the community tab's working? Did you notice any community posts at all? Were they images? Were they GIFs? Was any part of you inclined to respond to any of it? If anything ever pulls your attention in a way that you want to interact with it, make a note of what you wanted to interact with and why you wanted to interact with it. Because chances are your audience is going to be interested in a lot of the same kinds of things. Okay, so we've turned the process of selecting a video into an educational endeavor. Now let's get on to watching the video. If you've looked at your analytics before, you've noticed on a retention graph that lots of people click away right at the beginning. So when you're watching a video, take some time to understand if this is happening to you and why that might be happening. Did you want to stop watching the video at any point? Did your eyes go to the scroll bar to look for something else to watch? Did you scroll down to the comments to see what people were saying while the video was playing? Did you want to pause and come back at any point? If something pulled your attention away, was there anything that pulled it back? Like a loud noise or an odd camera cut or a change in music? As somebody who talks in front of a camera with just the upper half of their body, I get bored if there's long sustained shots of that with no other cuts in between. Like, that's basically just a lecture seminar, and as my notebooks will attest, I didn't do a very good job of paying attention in those. And if I'm not going to pay attention to one contiguous shot of somebody talking at me, why on earth would I expect my audience to? That's part of the reason that we cut to B-roll. That's part of the reason that everyone on earth cuts out their breaths. It drains your attention. And again, those aren't principles that are particularly new. But like most principles, there's the scientific understanding of it, and then there's the practical understanding of it that comes from having it happen to you. Like, before I started working on YouTube, I did not understand thumbnails, and I hated how people talked about thumbnails and talking about it being eye-catching because it feels manipulative, right? And this is something that you will hear very passionate people say a lot, which is, shouldn't the content stand on its own? Why do I have to use all these visual tricks to entice people to watch it? But then if you spend time observing your own watching habits, you'll understand that those visual tricks are the things that are getting you to look at the title and getting you to make a decision about whether or not you want to watch the video. And your content doesn't have a chance to stand on its own until somebody has decided to give it that chance, and they're never going to give it that chance if they never actually see it. Because if you won't draw the audience's attention, somebody else is going to. The same holds true for things like rapid cuts. I actually want to take an aside here because a lot of people say that you want rapid cuts because people don't have attention spans anymore, and that's just not true. People are perfectly willing to watch long videos and long streams. The reason that we do rapid cuts to help keep attention is because this angle right here, there is nothing fundamentally interesting about it. Dynamic viewpoints are interesting. That's why it's interesting to sometimes just be something in front of the camera. Audience members on YouTube are making a lot of choices in any given instant, from what video to watch, to where to put their eyes, to whether or not to keep watching a video, to whether or not to subscribe, to whether or not to leave the platform, to whether or not to watch the next video in the series or go on to something else. There is a lot to process, and you have competitors who are competing for their attention at any given moment. And as an audience development person, you need to not only be aware of that, you need to be aware of how it feels when it's happening to you. If you don't watch YouTube at all, start watching YouTube. Try and find at least a few channels that really speak to you. And if we're the channel that really speaks to you, I love you too. Mwah. And then once you find those channels, try and just go on a journey. Fall down the rabbit hole. Click the top video suggested like 100 times in a row and just see what happens. See where you wind up. It can only make you better at serving your own audience. Thank you everyone so much for watching. If you like this video, be sure to check out these other great videos on audience development. If you like this video, be sure to like it so that we know that you liked it and that you would like to see more. And if you haven't already, subscribe to Little Monster for more videos on audience development every single week. See you next time. And before next time, watch more YouTube. So weird. It's shaky, I should just probably take it off.